Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about what is arguably or widely regarded, we don't have to accept that, as Dvořák's greatest symphony. That is Symphony Number 7, formerly Symphony Number 2. Don't ask me why. We don't have to go into that. It's a great symphony, of course, and people generally regard it as Dvořák's greatest because it's his most Brahmsian, or one of the ones that's most Brahmsian. Actually, the two composers had a very fruitful back and forth exchange. Dvořák was inspired to write his seventh by Brahms' third, which was inspired by Dvořák's fifth, and Brahms' fourth probably has some, touches from Dvořák's seventh. We know that Brahms, for example, was fascinated by Dvořák's use of the piccolo and soft dynamics. And there's all kinds of things that go back and forth. It's very interesting, but that's neither here nor there. The seventh is a problematic symphony, to talk about a reference recording, because, one of the things about Dvořák that kind of always amazes me is that he's always treated with a bit of condescension, always has been, as a sort of Brahms wannabe, or the cute little Czech peasant who wrote lovely little tunes and, but wasn't a great master of form, or he couldn't possibly be as good as those German guys. It's horrible, actually, if you follow this sort of latent prejudice against Dvořák and this condescension that follows him in the commentary. And one of the reasons it's hard to come up with reference recordings for some of these works is because people don't really think they're worthy of having reference recordings. People play them. They play well. They're beautiful. Everyone enjoys them. Why would we have a reference? What are the tricks that need to be solved to make a reference recording? Well, it just so happens that the seventh is a very tricky piece, a very, very tricky piece. And some of the best people who did Dvořák symphony cycles didn't do so well in the seventh. The three biggies: Kubelik, Kertész, Rovitsky, those were the big ones, had Dvořák sevenths that were, well, sometimes very good. Yes, sometimes very good, but as often as not as good as the other ones. There was something about it. Maybe the Brahms factor intimidated them. I don't know. But Kubelik's seventh was not great. Rovitsky's was really not great. Kertész was good, but not as fun as his other ones. It's a really interesting conundrum. Of course, there were some fine sevenths in the Czech Philharmonic cycles. Neumann's analog seventh and digital seventh were both terrific, but those cycles were really not available in the West with enough frequency and consistency for there to be a consensus around whether or not those were reference recordings. So the reference recordings of the seventh, or the ones that people regarded most highly, tended to be singleton versions. There was George Sell, of course, who's marvelous. He's absolutely first-rate. Pierre Monteux on Decca, who was also absolutely terrific and didn't do any other Dvořák that I'm aware of. I don't think he did. Well, certainly not symphonies. So, those are splendid performances. But was there a consensus that they were the reference recordings? Well, they couldn't be, in a sense, because you also had these specialist Dvořák guys. So there the matter kind of rested until this showed up. Colin Davis with the Concergebouw. Now, Colin Davis was not your everyday Dvořákian. He also did the New World Symphony and the Eighth Symphony, both with the Concergebouw. These popped up in, I think the 70s, was it? 70s, early 80s, somewhere in there. Well, they're not digital, they're analog, so it must have been the 70s. He did 8 and 9, and those were more controversial. 9 was generally highly regarded. 8, not so much. It's interesting performance, actually. It has some very distinctive touches, but it wasn't, the kind of thing that was going to get universal aha. But this one, he's one of the few conductors who did 7, 8, and 9, and did his best work in the seventh, not 8 and not 9. And that was generally recognized. Whenever anyone talked about this performance, and I remember this vividly because I was there on the ground when this came out, people said, finally, yeah, a great new recording of Dvořák's seventh. Really remarkable how tricky this piece is. It's tough in terms of balance, in terms of orchestration, which is somewhat more conservative than in Dvořák's other symphonies, hence the Brahmsian moniker. It's tricky in terms of structuring, in terms of balance, in terms of handling the finale, getting the pace exactly right. It's such a beautiful symphony, though. Holy cow, is it wonderful? And, I remember quite vividly, a lot of people didn't know that this was the reference. And about 20 years ago, I was talking to a critic friend of mine, and he was like saying, Dvořák Seventh, which is the reference recording for Dvořák Seventh, because we all talked about this. Me and my critic friends, my very good friend Christophe Huss in Montreal at Le Devoir, when he was at Répertoire magazine in France, he had these listening sessions where they came up with reference recordings for major works. And he was scratching his head saying, what was this? I said, Colin Davis. And he listened to it. He went, oh, yeah, wow. Yeah, it's terrific. It's absolutely terrific. And it is absolutely terrific. And so for a brief period, because after that, all hell broke loose, with people doing Dvořák cycles, right? There was Nimi Yarvi did a cycle. Andrew Davis had done a cycle. I mean, there's a bunch of, all the Czech stuff started showing up. And so it was much more difficult. The consensus got diluted by all of the other stuff that came out. But yes, this was the consensus. It should still be the consensus pick, I think, because it has no weaknesses whatsoever. It is a beautiful exposition of what this work is. Now, you may have other favorites, as I said, but reference recording is not necessarily your favorite. Reference recording is the one that most people talked about or agreed was the best or most representative of the work in question, that got the most recognition. And this did it, unquestionably, at the time. So there you have it, my friends. The reference recording for Dvořák Seventh is Colin Davis with the Concergebouw Orchestra of Amsterdam. It wasn't called the Royal Concergebouw back then, which was on Philips and is now on Decca. If you can find it, listen to this. It will amaze you. I guarantee it. It's just marvelous. A beautiful, beautiful performance. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.